ministry wife is a vocation without a job description. And let's be honest, sometimes it seems like ministry might be easier if we did have one. If you are a ministry wife like me and are looking for hope, perspective, and a little bit of practical advice regarding your role, you're in the right place. Hi, I'm Christine Hoover, author of How to Thrive as a Pastor's Wife. Welcome to the Ministry Wives Podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. Join me as we hear from guests from various ministry contexts, having authentic conversations about our shared joys and challenges, even the ones we're unsure we can talk about. No topic is off limits. Today, my guests are Vance and Kristie Pitman. Vance and Kristie planted Hope Church more than 20 years ago in Las Vegas, Nevada. Together, they nurtured a small fellowship that started with 18 people in their living room into a vibrant, multi-ethnic fellowship that today speaks more than 50 languages, has planted more than 80 churches, and whose members regularly engage not only the city in which they live, but also the West and the world for the sake of the kingdom of God. Vance and Kristie have a special heart for church planting, and they love pouring into planters and their wives, encouraging them to join in God's eternal redemptive mission of engaging the lost, making disciples, and multiplying the church in North America and around the world. The Pitmans have 4 children and 4 grandchildren, and they live just outside Las Vegas, Nevada. You may know that Vance recently transitioned from being the lead pastor of Hope Church to leading the Send Network at the North American Mission Board. I asked Vance and Kristie to join me today to share about his new role, but also to share with us about a time in their ministry where they went through things personally while continuing to lead the church. I asked them, how can we as pastors' wives help our husbands when they're carrying burdens behind the scenes? And what do we do when we're the ones who need help? Here, friends, is my conversation with Vance and Kristie Pitman. I am so excited to get to welcome Vance and Kristie Pitman to the podcast. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Christine, thanks so much. We're honored to be here with you today.
Yes.
Are y'all in Las Vegas still or somewhere else?
Yes, we are.
We are. We're in Las Vegas, and it's still home, and we get to do ministry from here. It's been the city we've lived in for 22 years, so we love it.
Yeah, well, I say that like everybody knows what I'm talking about, but you guys planted a church in Las Vegas, 20 years ago? Is that right?
It's been, 22, right?
Yeah, 22, yeah.
It's been 22.
We moved here December of 2000. So it's this Christmas will be our 23rd Christmas in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That's the year that my husband and I got married. So we can count everything by, because it's easy, 2000.
It is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,
everything for us is pre-Vegas and post-Vegas. So Vegas is home now. We've been here, like we said, 23 years. And love it. It's our city. We love living here.
But you recently transitioned from being the title lead pastor of the church you planted to leading Send Network. Is that right?
Yes. So we did. We moved here 23 years ago to joining God's activity of seeing a church born that would multiply churches with a heart for the nations. And after 23 years of that and seeing the Lord do some great things, I mean, we saw about 5,000 people baptized into our fellowship as first-generation believers, is a church that spoke, there were 54 first languages spoken in our church, so incredibly multi-ethnic. Yeah. Have the privilege of sending out over 400 people and being about starting 80 churches in the Western United States out of our fellowship. So it was our baby for 23 years. But we went away on sabbatical about a year and a half ago, and it was on that sabbatical we began to really sense the Lord leading us into a next season. And I had a young man that had been with me 15 years on our team. He joined me when he was 20. He's 35 now, and went through about a year-long process of transitioning to him as the new lead senior pastor of the church there. And we stepped into this role, I did, of leading Send Network, and us feeling a call to pour into the next generation of pastors and planters. After being out here for 20 plus years, and about every year getting a call from some church wanting us to come move there and be the senior pastor, either somebody was retiring or leaving. And I just realized that, man, we've got to do a better job of raising up the next generation of pastors and planters and pouring into those families. And we felt that what God had called us here to do in Vegas was a stepping stone for that now. And we're in the middle of that.
Yeah. How's the transition been going from lead pastor, pastor's wife to Send?
Yeah, what do you think?
Whole new role, right? Yeah. It's been interesting. It's different, and, it's not a good or bad situation. It's just different. You can imagine being a senior pastor's wife for 22 years or 30 years.
Yeah, 22 in Vegas.
I was 22 in Vegas. We've been married 31 years. So, being that, and then just trying to really find my place again, if you can imagine just, being involved in, I was involved in the worship. I was involved in whether it was rocking babies in the nursery, or volunteering in the kids ministry and leading a little small group there, and just really, really heavily involved. Right. And so going from that to, not really doing that anymore, just kind of finding my new place, figuring that out. So that's kind of ongoing right now, but it's okay.
It's very emotional because every day it's kind of like when you're kids, you spend, 18, 20, 25 years raising, and then they get married and they move out and do their own thing. Mm-hmm. It's right.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
But it's also painful and emotional, and it messes up your rhothyms and you have to figure things out again and discover a new season of life. And because we've transitioned to a young leader at our church that I've been with for a long time. We got a great relationship, but he's a young leader. We realized he needs his space. Mm-hmm. And when you're the founding pastor and wife, you have a big shadow in a place like that and in our city. And so we distanced ourselves from the fellowship for a while to give them some space. And that's made it even harder. Yeah. Because that's been our world for so long. And really for my wife in particular, because Kristie's underselling herself. But what's unique about her is some pastors' wives like to be on the stage, like to be up front. That's not her. She's the type person that, like, you can't plant churches without people like my wife. You've got to have those people that are in the background, that are willing to be servants in the night watches, unnoticed, unheard of, but just give so much of their time. And she's done that for so long. Now in this transition, kids are all out of the house. She's given that up. And I'm stepped into this role with Sin Network, and I got this stuff, but her finding her place in the transition has been,
it's challenging. I mean, I don't know of another word to use other than it's just challenging at this point, and that's okay. Again, just finding my place again and figuring it out and seeking the Lord, and what does that look like? So,
well, I will say really cool though, Christine. God's been gracious in his favor in our city. We just got the Raiders, the football team here, the NFL team. Mm-hmm. And just by a weird set of circumstances, we just got invited in. I'm co-chaplain of the team this season. And it's given us an opportunity to shepherd and be missionaries in our city in this in-between season, like God in his grace. So she's doing Bible studies for players and coaches' wives. And
that's so cool.
Just a really neat opportunity that the Lord in his grace has given us to continue to shepherd in our city. So that's been really cool.
And that is cool because it's something, again, I've just been praying very specific for, like, we know this is our city, that God called us to this city. We know we're here. We love our city. And so we want to continue to be a blessing and to be able to serve in this great city. So for this to come up, it was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. That's really cool. So we're excited.
That's great.
Yeah, because our daughter and son-in-law just moved back here with 3 of our grandkids. They're going to be planting a new church in Vegas, being sent out of our church here in Vegas.
Right.
So, we're going to both jump in and help.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's fun, but that's
very exciting.
That's in process. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think y'all just gave voice to whether someone's been doing church plant for 22 years and steps out of that. We all go through these transitions, and we have to kind of, I think especially for the wives, I think that's harder to kind of figure out what's my spot. And so we can relate to that. And I'm thankful for what y'all have done. And I know that God's got more for you coming. Yeah. I'd love to take some steps back though into that time when y'all were in your church. Because you experienced some personal burdens behind the scenes of your ministry. I'd love to hear about that. And I ask because we all also, as pastors and pastors' wives, experience those kinds of things, but it's hard sometimes to know how to talk about that when you're also leading. And so I'd love for you to tell us about that time.
Yeah. And Christine, I think I'd say, first of all, a lot of times people only know stories from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
And a lot of people know of our story because of the uniqueness of Vegas and because we were sent out in some ways from high profile leaders out here in churches. A lot of people know our story, but they only know it from the outside. And so they see the outside and they hear about the people coming to Christ, the churches that have been planted, and they don't realize that total transparency, we would have quit 1,000 times.
Yes, absolutely.
Because for every mountaintop, there's a valley. Yeah. And every one of those valleys are difficult and challenging. And one in particular that I think you're referring to, when we were in about year 2012, so we've been out here about 12 years, about halfway into our journey. Church planting anywhere is all consuming. I tell planters now, church planting is the highest high and the lowest low in a 24-hour period. That's over and over and over again. Yes. That's just what it is. It's mountaintops and it's valleys every 24 hours. You don't see them coming. And for the first 12 years, we were experiencing in the midst of that a lot of growth, a lot of people coming to Christ, but also a lot of challenge in a spiritually dark city like Vegas that was all consuming. Yeah. And we didn't have a good balance. We had some great balance as it pertained to our family and keeping our family the priority. Yeah. But we didn't balance work and rest rhythms really well. No. And so for that reason, in 2012, I kind of hit a wall of my body just gave out. After 12 years of running hard, my doctor described it as a physical version of a mental breakdown. I came home one day from work and tried to have dinner with the family, couldn't really put sentences together, said I'm going to go to bed, and slept for 8 days. I didn't wake up. She came and tried to wake me up periodically for 8 days and give me food, and I didn't eat. I lost about 20 pounds in 8 days.
I was legit concerned, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they got me up, drugged me to a doctor. Everything turned out to be okay. Physically, it was just your body reaches a point where it says enough's enough. Yeah. And we had to do a hard reset on our lives, which thankfully we had some great leaders in our church that stepped in, put some parameters on me for 9 months. I travel extensively. I'm, 150,000 miles a year on Delta Airlines and have done that for, 20 years. But so for 9 months, they pulled all travel, couldn't travel. I couldn't go to the office. They didn't let me hold a meeting, counseling appointment, lead the staff. I preached on Sundays about 30% of the time for 9 months, and that was it. Other than that, they pulled me out of everything to hard reset my life. And she obviously walked with me through all of that.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, in church planning, the belief, and I know it was for us, that, we had to do it all, right?
Yeah.
When you're church planning, you just do it all. And, you get to the place where you feel like, if I'm not here this weekend, or if I can't, there's just this belief that we have to be here for everything. And there's, we have to. And so, after 5 years, pass or whatever, you realize we haven't really taken a vacation, or we really haven't done anything for ourselves in that way. But, that's how we're driven, though. We're both really driven kind of people. And so, we didn't have like he said, a super good balance on our work life aspect, even though our personal lives and our family life were really solid, because we really believe in family. We believe in, keeping our family at the core of whatever we do. And we believe that's very, very important.
So Kristie, you weren't putting it sounds like you also were just going full speed, and you didn't see, there weren't any like red flags you were putting up, like stop.
No, I thought that was normal. I thought what we were doing, I really thought what we were doing is normal. Like this is just how it is. Like we're just going, we're getting at it. We got to accomplish this. We got to do that, and you're in it, and you don't realize that you've literally been running 100 miles an hour for years. And
you run a sprint for so long that it begins to feel like a marathon. You just think this is the normal pace you're supposed to keep. Yes. And church planting is challenging anywhere. Yeah, but you put it in a place like Seattle or Vegas or LA or New York City or Boston, some of these cities are just tough. I mean, like we're in the city that the enemy literally staked out for himself and is known all over the world as Sin City.
Yeah.
And we're in a city that is dark spiritually. Yeah. And God is blessing, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. But with that blessing comes all the messiness. Like I try to tell people, pastoring in Las Vegas is like reading the book of 1 Corinthians. Like take your Baptist goggles off and reread that book. Everything in that book is in our church times 10. Like if it's happening there, it's just messy and it's beautiful and it's pure, but gosh, it's challenging. But when you're parenting small kids, it just becomes normal. And when you're planting a church, it's like parenting preschoolers. It's just the rhythm of your life.
What you do.
Yeah. You learn a new normal is what I would say. We learn a new normal. You forget what normal is, and then you create a new normal, and then you realize this isn't normal. Right. We can't do this. So I'm wondering what parameters you put in place once that happened, because I would imagine, Kristie, you didn't have the physical breakdown, but that stops you in your tracks too. And so you're having to rethink some things. So what are things that y'all rethought and changed?
Yeah, well, I think Vance could probably answer that better, but because that's where a lot of the leadership at our church really put in some hard things for him. And, and with that, they were also telling me what they were doing and that I needed to help him at home, making sure that he did those things, parameters like, okay, you're not going to be doing this. And you got to say no to that. Or
it was really about building intentionally. And this is the principle, I guess, if I was going to summarize it like this, we had to learn that rest is as spiritual as work.
Yeah.
Jesus in the New Testament told the disciples to come away with me and rest for a while. And in the Greek language, it's an imperative, meaning rest is a matter of spiritual obedience. And if we're not careful in ministry, we wear such a badge of work. And for me, I grew up in ministry. I grew up around ministry, and I'd seen ministries I'd seen laziness in ministry. And I put a chip on my shoulder that I was going to, like I had guys that left corporate America to come work with me and quit after 2 or 3 years and said, dude, I've seen people work and I just can't keep the pace that you keep. But for me, it was just what I did. It didn't feel abnormal. It just felt normal. And for us, we built a rhythm around it, but having to learn that rest is not unspiritual. And so having to intentionally build that into our lives on both a micro and macro levels. For example, at a macro level, after that event, our church just began to give me the encouragement to take my vacation every year in a block. So at that time, it was 3 or 4 weeks a year, I think, that I had in vacation built up. And rather than taking a weekend here and 3 days there and never really unplugging, we started taking the month of July every summer.
Oh, wow.
And we've done that since 2013. So 10 years now, we've taken July every summer and just pull away, like from everything to where like 10 days in, I don't even know what day it is anymore.
Oh, that's amazing.
That has completely changed our lives. And then on a weekly basis, building in white space into your calendar where there's margin. I noticed in Jesus's life, like Jesus was never in a hurry. And nobody had more to do than Jesus had to do. And yet he was never in a hurry. And I looked at my schedule and I was always in a hurry. And not only was I in a hurry, I took pride in being in a hurry. And then secondly, Jesus was always interrupted, but at the same time, he was never interrupted. He always had time for those divine appointments. And I didn't have time for divine appointments. I didn't have time for interruptions. That didn't fit. So building into my daily schedule at the micro level, white space. And then my admin, she began to work with my schedule. She began to clock all my hours. And then she would build in time tracker days when I was over 40 hours a week, where she would just block an entire day and say, you can't do anything today. And then her holding me accountable, and us together building stuff to do with our family around those rest periods. We've created some of the most, every year when I evaluate my admin now, I say to her, you'll never know the memories that I've built with my family that I wouldn't have had you not guarded and been such a gatekeeper for the rest in my life. And that's probably been the single biggest change.
Yeah, for sure.
That is so great. Well, and a lot of these things are, you can say them in summary statements now, but I'm thinking about as you're going through that and you're just, there's not the certainty of what do we need to do. And probably there's kind of like, what is even happening here? But yet you're still the pastor of this church. And I think that's where a lot of people can relate, whether they've had the physical breakdown or not, where they're going through stuff. They're going through stuff personally, but they still have to show up and the pastor has to preach and the pastor's wife is there. And
that's right.
And so how did you do that? How do you carry ministry burdens and I know you're saying your church pulled a lot of those off, but I wonder what you would say to people who that's not the case. Maybe they're carrying a private burden that they don't feel like they can share with other people. How do you do that?
Yeah, the thing that I say to planters, and we talk about this a lot, is that the primary call on our lives is not ministry. Right. The primary call on our lives is intimacy. Yeah. And ministry is what he does out of the overflow of intimacy. Right. And too many times we think Jesus saved us so we could do something for him. Yeah. But he actually saved us because he wants to be with us, and then he wants to do something through us. Right. And I think the key in all of this is every time we have those, like for us, I think a big thing we dealt with going through this was guilt. Because once we built rest into our lives, every time I was resting, I felt guilty because I felt like I should be doing something. Yeah. So what do you do with that? You got to take that burden. Jesus said, cast all your cares on me because I care about you. What's that? It's an invitation to intimacy. Right. He's inviting us to deep, intimate fellowship with him. And it's in fellowship with him that we find that peace. We exchange. Paul said it this way, and it's the same thing Jesus said in Matthew 6, but Paul said it in Philippians, be anxious for nothing. Right. So the word anxious there is a word translated worry, stress, anxiety in the New Testament, and it's literally an imperative. He said, be anxious for nothing, meaning for you and I to live with anxiety and that tension is really not scriptural. He said, don't do that. But he said in everything through prayer and supplication, through intimate fellowship with the Father, give everything to him. And he said, then the peace of God that passes all comprehension will guard your hearts and minds. There's an exchange that takes place in intimacy where that burden, anxiety says, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle this? Burden says, Lord, what do you want to do with this? Right. And when we lay that at his feet, he gives us peace. And that's what we begin to experience.
Absolutely. Just daily fellowship. I mean, it sounds so simple, but that's really what it is. It's just the simple daily fellowship with the Father every day, and there's no substitute for that, there's just not. You can read every book you want to read, but the bottom line is if, you're not in daily fellowship with him, you're not going to be filled. And that's what I've learned throughout just my journey in itself is just daily spending time with him and letting his word fill me every day.
A lyric we use a lot is our emotional health rises and falls based on our time alone with Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
Period. Like, are we good today? Well, we're good today if we've been with Jesus. If we haven't been, we're probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah. You guys need to start a coffee mug shop or something with all your little sayings because y'all have those good little sayings that stick with us. Those are really good. Yeah. But Kristie, I'm wondering for you, you're watching your husband really struggle through that season. And a lot of ministry wives, their husbands they may be dealing with things like depression or, they're wanting to quit ministry. And the wives are just like, what do? I don't know what to do in this situation. How do I help him? What would you say to wives who are in similar situations that you were?
Yeah. I mean, for me, all I could do was be there for him. And what I mean by that is just and pray for him. Obviously, that's just an obvious one that we all should do. But just, ask him, what are your needs today? What can I do for you today? And, you got to know from my perspective, I'm one of those people where I don't really dwell on things a whole lot. I typically think about it and I pray about it, and then I'm like, okay, take action. That's kind of how I'm wired. And so, for me, it's just obviously watching him go through something like that is heartbreaking because I don't think there is anything you can specifically do to help someone who is struggling internally like that. Yeah. That's really a tough place to be. I'm not going to lie. So, for me, I just tried to be there for him, whatever he needed. Like you said, bringing him food, making sure his, maintains his schedule like he needs to, and all those different things. But other than that, there's not a whole lot.
Is this something that y'all shared with the whole church that you were going through?
What's ironic is I actually, until the book came out, I don't think I'd ever even told the story
I don't think
publicly.
So. Yeah.
And I wasn't trying to hide it. It just wasn't I don't know. I've just watched a lot of people in moments like that live with too much information on their sleeve. And I guess for us, we just we knew we were still a work in progress. Yeah. And yes. I wanted the cake to be fully baked before we started rolling out there. So, I mean, the church, obviously, we didn't hide it. The church knew that, I'd gone through something that I was taking a step back for a season, but I was still there preaching. So for a lot of the people, they didn't, they saw me preaching at least a regular rhythm. Right. So they didn't feel as much different. For me, I was just in a season where there was so much uncertainty, because when you're feeling all of that, like you don't know if you'll ever be back to normal. Yeah. And so the biggest thing that, what you ask about for Kristie, I mean, just with so much uncertainty, the certainty that I found in her and in us was, like whatever happened with the ministry side of things, and was I going to be able to do this again, or what? Like, we were good. And just that island of certainty in the midst of an ocean of uncertainty was so solidifying for my life.
That's great. Yeah. That's really great. So as y'all are moving through that and you're starting to realize we need to put in these new practices of rest, and that's a spiritual work and just as important as work. I'm wondering how you saw your ministry change, like how you engaged the church. How did that change? What kind of fruit came from that?
The first word that comes to my mind is freedom. And I say that because up until 2012, we were involved in everything so intricately. And after that, we began to pull back and lead at a different level. And the church continued to thrive, which meant it wasn't as dependent on us as we thought it was. Like Jesus was building his church like he said he would. And we could take rest in that. Like we were talking before we even got on air about this, and how, when we came back, we implemented these things of rest, and like it continued to do well. Like these things, we could have let this go a long time ago and it would have been fine. Because Jesus Jesus is in control of his church, and you can trust him with it. So there was a real sense of freedom. And there was also a sense where we have some people, the guy who's now my executive vice president with Sin Network had been my executive pastor for 17 years with me in Vegas. And during this season, I transitioned so much leadership to him. And honestly, I'm the visionary. He's the integrator for our church. The last 7 to 8 years of growth and incredible expansion of our ministry had more to do with his leadership than mine. And it was this learning through this process of delegating and empowering others, that the church has been gifted by Jesus through the Holy Spirit. And there's a lot of gifts in the body that need to be unleashed. And too many of us as pastors are holding onto some things too tightly and not letting those things go. And we're not only hurting ourselves, we're robbing the church and the kingdom from real fruit and real ministry.
That's so great. Well, I would imagine you're wanting to bring a lot of these lessons into your work with Sin Network. I mean, are you getting to do a lot of, I guess I don't totally understand what your job is. I would imagine you're traveling around and you're getting to preach and all that. But are you spending time with planters and helping them kind of work through these kind of things too?
Yeah, we do. We're in everything that has to do with Sin Network and church planting falls under now our leadership. And so everything from how we assess planters, how we train them, how we coach them, the gatherings that we have for them, a lot of the stuff that I'm saying on this podcast, we've done 5 gatherings. We'll have close to 3,000 of our planters and wives over 12 months in these gatherings. And I'm teaching a lot of this stuff about kingdom and about intimacy and about Jesus and his church to our planters right now. We've made some of this a part of our orientation. Kristie goes to all these gatherings with me and is there. We're engaging with planters and their wives. We're building residencies and systems where we can invite them into these environments. I've built a team that understands the things that we're talking about and pouring this in. And we've restructured the way we lead regionally to implement a better spiritual vitality with all of we have about 300 in our missionary force that are not our planters. They're actually Sin Network staff all over North America. And we're implementing a new strategy where I want it to be said that if you work at Send Network, you love Jesus more and you're better equipped for kingdom service because you've served here. And before, with Send Network, planters were the tip of the spear and pastors were our primary customer, but our field missionaries were kind of the hired hands that we worked hard and then put up wet. And so we now are pouring into them so that they're growing in Christ and experiencing spiritual vitality and rest and health. And I just think it makes our network stronger. So yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do with bringing that to them.
Yeah. Well, I've also heard that you have a vision for the women in Send Network that I don't know what that is, but I'm excited to hear because my husband and I planted a church.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of things that I needed and desired through Send Network. And now I know they've grown a ton of things through like Kathy Litton's work and all that.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd love to hear from you directly what your ideas and hopes are for women.
Yeah. So I believe in a New Testament missiology. And if you go all the way back to the missionary team that Jesus empowered to begin the movement that we're a part of today, and then pass the baton to the apostles and Paul and others, women have always been a key part of the missionary movement. From the most theologically significant letter written in the New Testament, Rome, being delivered to the church at Rome by the hands of a woman, to the message of the gospel, the solidification through the message of the resurrection, first being entrusted to women to share with the apostles, to women throughout the New Testament. So I am complementarian, but I am complementarian in a way that believes in the unleashing of the church for the expansion of the kingdom. And I am disappointed and discouraged by the recent conversations within our convention of churches. I'm prayerful and hopeful that by next year's convention, we're going to do better and the language is going to be strengthened. But at Send Network, I believe we will not see the full potential of the church unleashed in engaging cities and nations for the gospel to be taken and the kingdom to be expanded without unleashing the women missionary labor force in the field. And so we want to become the primary sending center for women as a part of missionary teams, leveraging their job skill and passion where they live, work, and play, joining in the mission of God. We want to equip women to engage in their local context with the gospel. We want to develop women to strengthen the church teams that are being sent out. We want to begin to think more about sending missionary teams rather than just church planters, but missionary teams that are men and women together. And then we want to mobilize women to activate their missional calling beyond the walls of the church. So in all of those ways, we're developing training and processes and assessments and all types of things to empower and mobilize women as a part of the missionary force. And I believe it's an untapped resource within our convention of churches because of what some of the language that we've used and some of the processes that we put in place. Yes, I believe that the senior pastor and elders should be the husband of one wife. Beyond that, we need to unleash these women to be a part of the missionary force, and we will not see kingdom potential fully reached unless we do that.
That sounds good to me. Well, just closing, because I love when I get to talk to experienced pastors and pastors' wives you guys have served in different ways, contexts. What word of encouragement would you leave with those women listening who are church planters' wives or pastors' wives?
Well, let me just say that we all struggle, right? I mean, we all have moments and sometimes seasons where we just struggle and it's hard. But what I believe that is the enemy's way of isolating people, women specifically, and getting them alone where they think that, oh my goodness, nobody knows what I'm going through. Mm-hmm. Nobody can understand what's going on. And so you tend to isolate yourself from that. And so I would encourage women who are struggling or maybe, going, I don't know what I'm doing. You've got to talk to somebody. You can't keep it in. I was very, very blessed and fortunate enough when we started the church here that I had a couple of good friends where I was able to talk to, and to be able to share any struggles with and those things. So I encourage women to find that lady who loves Jesus, who, really is seeking the Lord, and and share with that person. Or even beyond that, if you have a good counselor, a Christian counselor that you feel comfortable talking to, just to be able to get these things out. I encourage that. I think that's important, to be able to share and to talk with what you're going through.
Yeah. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength.
That's
to
right.
go through those struggles and to go through it with other people. And I think what she's articulating so beautifully is the power of community. That the New Testament knows nothing of a Christianity without community.
Yeah.
And too many planters and pastors and their wives isolate. And we teach the principle of community, but we don't live the principle of community. And we all need others on this journey of following Jesus. So don't do it alone.
Yeah. That's good. Thank y'all so much for joining me, sharing your story. I know it's an encouragement and help to those who are listening. So thank you.
It's our honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Ministry Wives podcast, a production of the North American Mission Board. I would love to hear from you. We are creating an episode full of our listeners' funniest or most embarrassing moments in ministry. Record and send your story to me at the link in the show notes. And don't forget, if you found this content helpful, please rate and review us on your podcast platform or share it with a friend. You can find this podcast and other helpful resources at ministrywivespodcast.com.